how many greats, but at least two. Great-grandfather was the first registered harbour master in New Zealand, and he used to row with a crew of 13-man whaling boat out to the head of the Kaipara Harbour and bring in sailing ships. And his sons, my grandfather, and his other brothers, most of them were involved in the sea and in being ship's captains. I grew up in a town called Dargaville, and I went to school at Salmon Park Primary School, and then moved on to Dargaville High School. They were the only two schools in the town. Yeah, I enjoyed school. Academically, I was more distracted by playing most sports that were on offer. Yeah, and I really enjoyed, pretty much like any country kid. Played rugby from the age of 5, I would say, and we used to run around bare feet. We didn't really get, I don't think we wore boots until we were about 12 or 14, and yeah, and I played rugby right through till 1985-86. I played a season in Aspen and Colorado for the Gentlemen of Aspen. I don't actually remember my first wave, but I certainly know from a very early age I had a deep interest in the sea, and I've always not really liked swimming in a pool or a lake. And so I think just the movement and the fluidness and diving in and out of waves, and then to be able to slide along on top of it is great. And even today, I truly enjoy that aspect of surfing, you know, and just being in connection with the ocean. And I think those things have been with me all the time, so I'm sure that that's kind of how I form my deep appreciation of the ocean. Yeah, there were always a crew of older guys that surfed when we were interested in surfing, and you know, well, one of my first surfboards that I owned was actually my art school teacher's kneeboard, and he forgot to tie it on the roof one day and it flew off, and so it was fairly highly damaged, so I set about with my dad fixing it up and got it spray painted, and that was my first surfboard that I owned. And it sort of progressed from there, and yeah, had mates that surfed, and in New Zealand we're lucky enough to be able to drive a car at 15, so you become pretty mobile, and yeah, travelled sort of, it's only like 3/4 an hour drive from one side of the coast, from the east to the west coast, so depending on the weather and the surf, there's a fair few options as to what we would do. Yeah, certainly, like growing up in New Zealand, you learn about the sort of Maori culture, and especially in a small town in the north where I came from, there's, you know, a large percentage of the people at school were Maoris or related to Maoris, so you know, you learn about their culture and Maui paddling out and all sorts of myths and legends. What drew me to Australia was probably the same as a lot of people that I grew up with. I grew up in a small country town, so first of all, you probably, like me, I went to art school in Auckland, at the Big Smoke in the city, and a number of people that I went to school with and grew up with, they either take the big jump and go to England and Europe and stay away for a little while, or the shorter step, which is to come over here to Australia. Well, when I first came to Australia, I actually had a job lined up at an advertising agency in Sydney, and it didn't take too long to realise I wasn't going to live in Sydney, so I rang them and said I won't be coming for that interview. And so my sister and her boyfriend were here at the time, so we loaded up into a Holden station wagon and we spent a month driving from Sydney to Coffs Harbour. Slept in the car, under the trees, under the stars, and surfed all over the place and had a great time. And so yeah, I was in Coffs Harbour for 3 or 4 months, and then came up to the Gold Coast actually to watch the first, but it would be in 1980, the Stubbies contest. The timber surfboard really came about, had some thoughts of building a cook box, and so I went online and tried to find some plans, and that's when I discovered that well, there's lots of other possibilities, and instead of just building something to maybe hang on the wall, that maybe I could build something that was a little more modern, and that I could surf, you know, in a more regular way, shall we say. So yeah, I went online and came across quite a few different sites, and they were a bit rare then, but Paul Jensen from Washington State, he had a method and plans of how to build a board. And so I set about drawing up my own plans, and ended up using a sheet of plywood that was 8 foot long, so I ended up with a 8 foot long fish. And it has a plywood frame and plywood deck and bottom, and then it had cork, laminated cork rails along the lines of what Paul Jensen was building. And I've always loved building things. My dad was the same, and so I grew up with lots of tools. So yeah, and you know, I think the first thing I was confronted with, it's all very well to be able to build something out of wood, but then you're confronted by the fact that you've just taken for granted all this time that you've been sitting on top of a surfboard and not really discovering what all the complexities of the design, and you then throw yourself into the fray of being a surfboard designer to be able to build one. So, you know, it's kind of confronting when you draw it all up on a piece of butcher's paper and then cut it all out. It's not till about 75% through the whole deal that you realise what you're going to end up with. You know, so there's a lot of work in building a wooden surfboard. You know, you're forever challenged by the tools, the skills you've got, and you're probably planning the next one before you finish this one, because it's a really thought-provoking process. But there's nothing better than finally paddling into a wave on a board that you've built yourself. Yes, I thought I might end up with a bum full of splinters after I did my first turn, but you know, it's an intriguing process. It's sort of been a natural progression from the other event that I organised called the Alley Fish Fry, and once I got into building boards, I found a lot of people were intrigued by the whole wooden board thing, and the more I looked around, I realised that there wasn't really a forum where people who were interested in wooden boards could actually learn a lot more about it. And because I'd done the fish fry, which is just a gathering of like-minded people, I thought to do the same with the wooden surfboards was a given. And it's pretty amazing when you can email people you've never met, and they turn up in the park with their wife and 6 surfboards, and they've never been to Australia before. And you know, I don't promise anything, I just say, let's get together. So, you know, there is a strong bond, and the wooden surfboard, I think a lot of people have a natural affinity with wood, and if you surf and you like wood, you eventually build a wooden surfboard. I have people get in touch with me who want to build a wooden surfboard. I don't think they have any idea about taking it surfing. They'd be very happy to create this thing and hang it on the wall. And so it's also interesting to me, because if you said to somebody, would you build a foam surfboard, they go, oh mate, I wouldn't know where to start. You know, you go, well, you know, got a few tools, would you build a wooden one? And they go, yeah, I'll give that a go. Yeah, there's no harder way of building a surfboard than building it out of wood. So yeah, it's interesting.